We're going to try to beat Deflation Chimps, a custom challenge where we'll go from rounds 31 to 100 with only $20,000. One life, no monkey knowledge, no selling, and no powers, so the hardest of both game modes. We started off with a double discount village in Corvus. I figured I can almost do a 1 TC with him, so he'd be a good starting point. Then we had to figure out what to spend our remaining $14,805 on. Our main issues would be camos, purples, and Moabs. So what towers can help with all of these? I started with a 204 Mermonkey, as not only can it pop purples and provide amazing stalls for Corvus, but it also decamos Bloons that get lured into its song. And with the rest of our money, we picked up a 013 Glue Gunner for some consistent slows and jungle drums on the right village. With this, we've effectively made logs much longer because of how slow the Bloons will be moving, and our Siren's song will distract them constantly. This will not only let Corvus attack the Bloons longer, but also give him more time to get his spells and abilities off cooldown each round, and with that, we hit play. Now, I knew getting levels on Corvus should be our main priority because we're starting on round 31 and we have almost no money to spend on him. Normally, on a run like this, you'd spend hundreds of thousands of dollars leveling Corvus up alongside Nourishment, but here we have to do it with only his mana. But that's why we have the stalls of the Glue Gunner and the Mermonkey. We can cast Nourishment more often this way. So that's what we did. I put the Mermonkey's shell right next to Corvus so he could always haunt Bloons, and I used Soul Harvest basically whenever it was up. This let us sacrifice a full mana pool basically every time. And for rounds 37 and 38, we were able to Soul Harvest all of the leads thanks to the stalls instead of having to cast Spear or Ember. But this brings us to round 40 and the first Moab of the run. We started the round with a Nourishment and just let Corvus's base spirit do the damage. Normally this would be a lot closer, but because of the stalls we were actually able to pop the Moab layer about 1/4 of the way through the track, and we cleared up the insides without issue. This put us just $193 away from level 7, so you know I spent that money leveling him up. It would have been way cooler to get down to exactly $0, but getting down to 7 is fine too. Anyway, we continued our trend of only casting Nourishment, but then we faced our first purples of the run, and they were camouflaged. I didn't want to cast any spells to see how fast our setup could handle these, and I was very impressed. The Mermonkey was not only able to decamo every single purple, saving us a vision, but also popped all of them to yellows or below, so no spells were needed this round. This wasn't always the case though, as round 48 also has camo purples, and here it took us 2 tries. The first time, the Mermonkey wasn't able to decamo every one of them, and I only cast Trample and not Vision, so our spirit skipped right over the camos that leaked. The second time though, our Siren either decamoed them all or fully popped them. Either way, a single trample beat the round. As for round 49 though, this was our first time getting overwhelmed. Even with Spirit, Corvus wasn't able to keep up with all the Bloons. To get around this, we started the round with an Ember to pop all the ceramics and zebras. Then, once the Regrow Rainbows came, we used Spear. This let us pop the round and still have plenty of mana and spells available for round 50. Here though, all we did was use Soul Harvest a few times and cast Ember near the end of the round, and then sacrifice the rest of our mana. Round 51 has some camo ceramics that were easily picked up by our Mermonkey, but to take out all the regrows we needed to use Ember again. While I wasn't a fan of using this much mana all the time, we did leak without it, so it was kind of necessary. But the rest of the 50s were pretty straightforward. We cast Ember every time the Bloons got far, used Spear on the ceramics on round 55, cast Vision for all the camo rainbows on 56, and continued to spam Nourishment whenever possible. The exciting thing is we hit level 10 at the end of round 57, meaning Corvus learned his Dark Ritual ability, which is amazing at clearing weaker Bloons and making tons of mana. The first time we used this was on the start of round 59, and it instantly maxed out our mana pool, letting us use Spear to beat the round. But that brings us to round 60 and the first BFB of the run. This is normally the last round of Deflation, but we still have 40 rounds to go after this. Luckily, between Moab Glue and the Mermonkey, we broke the BFB layer before it even made it through the first log, giving us plenty of time to pop the insides. Not only did we do this with just an Ember, but we also managed to squeak in a Nourishment mid-round. Then we popped all the regrowed zebras on 61 with a Malevolence, a spell that I almost never use. But it worked perfectly here, and the Spirit and Dark Ritual cleaned up the rest of the round. But now we're under round 62 and it's crazy amount of purples. To get past this, we cast Repel to slow them down, and once a purple was closing in on the exit, we cast a Trample. This took care of everything but the camos and Moabs, but that's nothing a Vision and Ember can't solve. And just like that, we were on to round 63. We started off by toggling on Spear and Aggression and casting Dark Ritual. This took out the first rush of ceramics and filled our mana pool. Once the first wave was finished, we cast Echo to take out the second wave of ceramics, and as the third wave came through, we used Soul Harvest to reap some of them. This made the third wave much easier and we popped it just fine even though Echo wore off. But the rest of the 60s were super easy. We kept sacrificing as much mana as possible with nourishment, and we really only had to cast Ember from time to time because of how much our other monkeys were slowing down the Moabs and BFBs. But that brings us to round 70. Right away we cast Vision and Spirit just to make sure we could pop all the camo whites that come on this round. Maybe the Mermonkey could have kept up with them, but honestly it wasn't a big deal because of how fast we were making mana with our abilities. The next funky round was 74, where I accidentally made a Regrow Farm out of the fortified camo Regrow ceramics that come in the middle of the round. To get around this, we cast Vision and Ember once they started getting past the Mermonkey, which didn't give them enough time to regrow and multiply. Then we finished off the round with a Nourishment Dark Ritual combo and auto attack the BFB down to nothing while we got our abilities and spells off cooldown. The great thing about the Mermonkey and Corvus is that the song keeps a ton of Bloons inside the range of Dark Ritual for a super long time, so it deals a ton of damage and makes him much more mana than usual. For round 75, we just used Ember, Aggression, and Spear, and it was more than enough to take out the round, even with us squeaking in a Nourishment. 76 was absolutely free, as Corvus's base Spirit could one-shot the ceramics, and a Soul Harvest took out half of them. And round 77 we beat with an Ember and both abilities. But now we're on round 78, which is normally tough for Corvus as it has purples and camos to deal with. We opened with a max size Nourishment and instantly got back to full mana with a Soul Harvest on the first Ceramic Rush. With this chunks of Bloons missing, the base Spirit finished off the ceramics pretty easily, and we were able to push all the Bloons back to the entrance. Once the purples started spawning, we cast Repel to slow them down, and once the ceramics came in, we cast Vision and Trample, which popped the rest of the round for us. Round 79 looked like it was going to be super easy, as our Spirit was one-shotting the rainbows and Dark Ritual made us oodles of mana, but shortly after this we accidentally made a Regrow Farm too big to handle. So the second time around, once they made it through the ritual, we cast Echo and Storm to push them back, and once Echo wore off, we cast Ember. This was able to take out all the rainbows, and a mixture of normal attacks and Soul Harvest finished off the rest. Onto the ZOMG. The start was painfully slow, but after it was about a fourth of the way through the track, I activated Aggression for a little bit to speed things up. I also moved Corvus around the map with it so he could keep Soul Harvesting, but once we hit the limit on how many times we could use that in a round, I moved him back to his normal spot. And once the Moabs broke down into ceramics, I cast Ember to make sure nothing leaked. Round 81 is when super ceramics start coming, but all we needed was Aggression and both abilities to pop everything. But round 82 is where we did something fun. Once all the BFBs were close, I cast Overload, exploding our Spirit and breaking everything down into either nothing or just fortified Moabs. This is probably my favorite spell to cast, and I love it when it makes a round this easy, as it lets us get all our abilities off cooldown like it did here. All we did here was clean up the round with an Aggression, and we headed into round 83 with a full mana pool. Here we didn't need much, just an Ember and Repel near the end of the round, and we were able to sacrifice 800 mana in the process, as well as go into round 84 with a full mana pool. Surprisingly, this round didn't need any spells to get by, so we just cast Nourishment and used Dark Ritual to get back up to max mana for 85. But Corvus is already level 17, so even though we don't have any money to spend on him, we're on pace to getting him to 20 for the late 90s. For round 85, we opened with Aggression, and once we got the mana, cast Overload on the two ZOMGs. This broke the first one down to BFBs, which let us effectively cast Dark Ritual to get tons of mana, and between Aggression and the song, the BFBs were taken out pretty easily. Then we just had to do it again for the second ZOMG, so we just rinsed and repeated what we did the first time. Round 86 took absolutely nothing to beat, but 87 was another fun one. I moved Corvus around the map using Spirit Walk so that we could constantly be soul harvesting these ZOMGs and keeping up Aggression. But after the ZOMGs looked like they were feeling it, I had the genius idea to Nourishment away all of our mana. Luckily, right as Soul Harvest came back, we broke two of the ZOMGs down to BFBs, so our ability filled our pool. And we used this to cast Overload. This explosion took out everything but the last ZOMG, which we popped with Aggression and Ember. Round 88 was a bit tougher, but we took out all the Moabs and BFBs with an Echo Overload combo, leaving us with just two hurt ZOMGs that were pretty easy to pop with just our base Spirit and moving the song around a bit to get more use out of it. Round 89 took quite a few tries, but what got us through was an early Overload to take out all the fortified Moabs at the start of the round. Then, once the BFBs got involved, we cast Echo and Aggression, topped off our mana pool with a Dark Ritual, sacrificed that mana away to Nourishment, and got it all back with the Soul Harvest. Then we cast Repel and Frostbound to finish the round. But now we're in the 90s and are about to face DDTs. Just like we planned, the Mermonkey was able to decamo all three of the DDTs on round 90, and we popped them with an Ember. a strong showing from our boy Corvus. Then, a few seconds into round 91, we cast our final nourishment to the run as it made him hit level 20. With a maxed out Corvus, we can now focus all of our mana on spells to beat the round. Obviously, I used an overload to pop basically everything on this round and moved on to round 92. Here we just played it simple. Cast Echo, Aggression, and Ember to take out the Moabs and then focus down the ZOMGs. Now, I really wanted to use overload here, but I knew that round 93 might be tough with his DDTs, so we just kept Aggression on, moved the Siren Song around to be more useful, and cast Ember again near the end of the round. And this let us head into round 93 with a good amount of mana and only Ember on cooldown. Here, we waited until all 6 of the DDTs were caught in our Mermonkey Song before casting Ancestral Might, one of Corvus's strongest spells. This makes his spirit turn into a giant hand that deals massive damage but has much less range. This took out all the DDTs and most of the fortified BFBs. Then we just cast Aggression, Repel, and eventually Frostbound, and we were able to pop everything. On to round 94. To no one's surprise, we opened with an overload. This took out most of the BFBs, and after cleaning up a few Moabs, we were able to focus on the ZOMGs. Here, we just left Aggression on and cast Overload again once it came off cooldown. This left us with just a ZOMG, 1 BFB, and a few Moabs, all of which were pretty easily popped with just Corvus's base spirit. But now we're on to round 95, the round I couldn't beat in my Corvus 1TC. I opened with a Vision Repel combo to slow down the purples as long as I could. Then, when they were nearing the end of the track, I cast Trample to pop them all and get ready for the 30 DDTs. This took a few tries because sometimes the Mermonkey Song would cause the Trample to miss a couple purples, but once it worked, I cast Recover to get our spells off cooldown faster. Our Mermonkey and Glue Gunner stalled excellently during this time, and once the DDTs were about halfway through the track, I cast Vision once again. This guarantees Corvus can see all the DDTs, and after using Dark Ritual, I cast Echo and Ancestral Might. This combo demolished the DDTs, but tons of Super Ceramics were heading towards the exit. We had no way of popping them, so I cast Soul Barrier to use some of our mana to tank any leaking Bloons. While this was happening, Ancestral Might came to an end, and we cast Frostbound and Ember, and then Repel and Aggression to finish the rest of the round. Whew! Round 95 is over. Round 96 is scary too though, because of how long it takes everything to spawn. For the start, I let Corvus's base spirit run amok, but once the Moabs started getting pretty far, I cast Aggression and Echo to start dealing some real damage. Then, once the spirits were overlapped with the BFBs, I cast Overload, popping most of the round. Then, we just had to clean up some Moabs and pop the ZOMGs. Luckily, the Moabs were handled with just Aggression, so we could cast Ember, Frostbound, and Repel to pop the ZOMGs. Round 97 was free as we just used Aggression and Storm to break down the ZOMG layers, while Aggression, Repel, and Frostbound were able to handle the insides. But now we're on to the big, scary round 98. I opened with an Echo Overload to deal massive damage to everything, then cast Aggression and Ember to break the ZOMGs down to BFBs, leaving us with a ton of Red Lobsters to pop. From here, we just let our Red Spirit attack away until Overload was back off cooldown, and I waited until it was on top of the large group of BFBs. This took almost everything left, but Bloons almost leaked while our spirit was recovering. Luckily, our Mermonkey came in clutch and scooped up all of these until our spirit was back in action. Then we popped the rest with an Aggression and moved on to round 99. Here, we have 9 fortified DDTs to deal with. I waited until the DDTs started entering the screen before casting Vision, Echo, then Ancestral Might. This popped just about every blimp, leaving us with mostly Super Ceramics to deal with. We tanked a few with Soul Barrier, but the rest were taken out with a Repel Frostbound. And now all that's left is the bad. I started off the round with a Recovery to get our spells back off cooldown. The second we could, I cast Echo and Ancestral Might to deal massive damage to this purple whale, and I moved Corvus around the map to keep being in range to use Soul Harvest. Once we had the mana and our spells came back off cooldown, I used this combo again, popping the outer layer and the DDTs inside. This left us with just 2 ZOMGs, and after our base spirit broke them down to BFBs, I cast Overload one last time to pop everything and beat our Deflation CHIMPS run. And we almost pulled off a 2 MPC in the process, as Corvus had 1.9 million pops. But if you enjoyed this challenge, you'd enjoy this one, where I try to beat every difficulty of cubism without reusing a single monkey or hero.